At Sunday dinner, my mom said, "To our silent investor, always paying, never present." My dad smirked. I took a sip of wine and said, "To the investor who just pulled every cent out of your shared account." My sister choked on her drink. I set down my glass and walked out. 2 hours later, I had 16 missed calls and a Venmo request labeled, "Please undo it." I just hit decline, and then she allowed herself too much when she said it. Mom raised her glass and locked eyes with me like she was performing on stage. "To our silent investor, always paying, never present." Then she laughed. Not just a chuckle, but that self-satisfied kind of laugh she used when she thought she'd landed something clever. Dad grinned like he was proud of her. Amanda laughed too, trying not to choke on her wine. They all thought it was hilarious. That was the part that stuck with me. They actually found it funny. That night, I realized they didn't just take me for granted. They turned me into a joke. I sat there for a second, looked at the wine in my glass, then back at the 3 people I bent over backward to support. Mom, who hadn't worked a day since I opened the business, but somehow had the title Director of Strategy on LinkedIn. Dad, who hadn't contributed a single client, but was always talking about how his company was doing. Amanda, who couldn't make it through a full workday without a self-care break and still expected bonuses every quarter. I took a long sip of the wine and set my glass down. To the investor who just pulled every cent out of your shared account. Amanda let out a weird cough squeak and slapped a napkin to her mouth. Dad's grin vanished. Mom's face didn't change, just went blank like her body hadn't processed the words yet. I stood up calmly and walked out. No storming, no parting words, just silence. Left the napkin on the table and let the front door close behind me. I didn't go home. I booked a hotel 15 minutes away, ordered dinner, and ignored every call. By midnight, I had 16 missed calls, 3 text messages that went from confused to angry to pleading, and a Venmo request from Amanda titled, "Please undo it." I hit decline and turned off my phone. What none of them knew was that this wasn't some impulsive move. I'd been watching them for months. Not just what they spent, though the business expenses were insulting, but the way they talked about me. Things slipped. A client told me my mom said I was just a figurehead. One of Amanda's friends let it slip that Amanda told people I didn't really do anything. My own father introduced me at a wedding as someone who lucked into success. That one stuck. Meanwhile, I was funding their lives. The house they lived in bought by me. The cars leased under the company. The salaries they pulled every 2 weeks signed by me. And the business they bragged about. I built it from the ground up. Made the connections. Dealt with the chaos. Pulled the all-nighters. When it started growing, I didn't hire strangers. I kept it in the family. I thought I was doing something noble. Giving them stability, purpose. All I gave them was power they didn't earn. The office became their playground. Mom came in maybe once a week to review things, which mostly meant drinking overpriced lattes and gossiping in the break room. Dad turned his office into a shrine for sports memorabilia and spent more time watching stock tickers than doing anything useful. Amanda called in sick more often than she showed up and still thought she deserved a promotion because she had a strong vision. And I let it go. Month after month, I told myself they were learning, adjusting. That family came first. I told myself loyalty mattered more than productivity. But every time I gave them more rope, they used it to string up their own egos. So I stopped being generous. A week before dinner, I set up new accounts, moved the money, not just from the shared account, but from every company card they had access to. I told the bookkeeper to freeze any expenses they submitted unless I signed off. I rewrote their contracts. Legally, they were still employees, but now they'd have to prove their worth if they wanted to stay. They just didn't know it yet. Sunday was supposed to be their ambush. I know my mom too well. She planned that line. Practiced it, thought it was going to put me in my place. What she didn't know was that she was stepping into mine. The look on their faces when I said what I did, when I walked out and didn't look back, was the first time in years I saw even a flicker of what they used to be. Shocked, vulnerable, unsure. I slept better that night than I had in months. They were about to realize the foundation they stood on wasn't theirs. It was mine, and I was done pretending they earned any part of it. The next morning, I didn't even have to check my phone to know what kind of storm was brewing. I turned it on and watched the screen light up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls from Mom, Amanda, Dad, group texts, voice messages. Then came the emails, some sounding confused, others angry, and a few laced with that subtle guilt they'd mastered over the years. Amanda sent a long one. Said she was shocked by my behavior, how I'd embarrassed them in our family space, and how I'd risked the business. I didn't reply. Then Mom's email came shorter, colder. I'm disappointed, Brian. You could have handled this like a professional. The irony nearly made me laugh. She hadn't acted like a professional a single day in that office. Dad didn't email. He just sent a text. Let's be men and talk face to face. I'm at the club until noon. I stayed silent. Let it all sit. By the end of the day, Amanda was locked out of her company card. The front desk had called me earlier asking if she still had expense privileges. I said no. She found out the hard way when she tried to buy lunch for herself and a potential brand partner and the card declined twice. She ended up calling the office assistant to cover it. 2 hours later, I got a message from that assistant asking if Amanda was still employed. I said yes for now. That week, everything unraveled faster than I expected. Mom came into the office Tuesday demanding to know why her computer login no longer worked. I told it to reset every password. No one got in without permission. She stormed into the conference room and called my name loud enough for the whole floor to hear, like she expected me to magically appear. But I wasn't there. I was already 3 states away at a quiet cafe, watching the security footage from the building on my laptop. Dad was the next to spiral. He'd been using his company email to send stock tips to his golf buddies, none of which had anything to do with our business, and I'd flagged it. I removed him from every company list. He found out when he tried to RSVP to a major client dinner and was told he didn't have clearance. They started calling again. I didn't answer. When Amanda realized her promotion that she'd been hyping for 6 months wasn't happening because I never approved it, never even heard of it, she showed up at my condo. I wasn't there. My neighbor texted me that a woman was banging on my door and swearing at the hallway camera. What none of them understood was that this wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the jokes or the dinner toast or even the lies they told people about me. It was about the years I'd let them eat off a plate they didn't help fill. The years I gave them opportunity after opportunity, and they used it to inflate themselves instead of build something worthwhile. For too long, I thought I owed them something because they were family. Now, they were about to learn what happens when the person they underestimated finally stops playing along. And that was before they made things worse. They hadn't hit bottom yet. Not even close. But they were about to. It was like they wanted to get fired. A few days after I pulled the money, after I ignored the calls and the dramatic texts, they stopped pretending to be confused. That mask dropped fast. And what came next wasn't sadness or even guilt. It was retaliation. They went public. It started with a Facebook post from my mom, a photo of her, Amanda, and my dad all dressed up at some charity auction I hadn't sponsored, standing in front of a fake step and repeat banner. They clearly printed themselves with my company logo stretched and pixelated in the background. The caption, "Still standing strong even when the foundation crumbles. Family first foundation crumbles really." Then Amanda jumped on LinkedIn. She posted a long dramatic thread about toxic startup culture and founders who abandon their team in times of change. She ended it with a quote about how real leaders don't disappear when it gets hard. They adapt. People who didn't know us clapped for her. But the ones who did, they knew exactly who she was talking about. She didn't tag me, but she tagged the company, my company. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Employees started reaching out. One forwarded me a Slack message from my mom talking about a leadership reshuffle in progress. Another said Amanda had been hosting side meetings, pitching herself as the new voice of the brand. My dad, meanwhile, was telling people in our industry that I was burned out and probably stepping away permanently. They were orchestrating a takeover, not legally, not structurally, just in perception. They were rewriting the story, making it sound like I had walked away from the company, that they were stepping in to stabilize things, that they were the ones holding it all together while the founder flaked out. They must have thought I was too far removed to stop them, too passive to fight back. Then Friday came. That's when they scheduled it. A full company Zoom meeting. Title: Looking Ahead. A new chapter hosted by Amanda. Special guests were Mom and Dad. No mention of me. Someone from marketing tipped me off. I logged in quietly from an alias. Amanda opened with her fake boardroom tone. She talked about transitions and realignment of priorities. My dad jumped in about how strong leadership requires daily presence. Mom gave her usual monologue about vision and how she always knew this company would become something more collaborative. They never used my name once. Not out of respect, out of strategy. They were trying to erase me. They wanted to run the company without running it by me. They wanted control without the weight. They wanted to wear the crown without lifting the hammer that built the place. I didn't even watch the whole call. I was already dialing my lawyer before Amanda finished her sentence about taking the brand in a new direction. The removals were swift. By Monday morning, HR had delivered 3 formal termination letters. Their emails were locked, their access to the company accounts wiped. Security was told not to allow them into the building without clearance. I made sure every single document they'd signed when I brought them on was airtight. They'd spent the week painting a picture of a new beginning, so I gave them one. Only this time, they wouldn't be part of it. They didn't think I'd actually do it. Even after everything, after the stripped accounts, the revoked cards, the humiliating fallout from that pathetic Zoom stunt, they still thought I was bluffing. Like I'd come crawling back eventually the way I always did. Like I'd cool off, call a meeting, offer some watered-down version of forgiveness, and let them keep their seats at the table they didn't build. So when Amanda marched into the office Monday morning like she still owned something, it didn't shock me. It just confirmed I made the right call. I wasn't there to see it, but security told me she came in loud, heels clicking like a soundtrack, iced coffee in hand, demanding someone unlock her office. She didn't make it past the lobby. She argued with the front desk for 10 full minutes before they called up. I gave them one sentence. She doesn't work here. They escorted her out. She went straight to Instagram Live. That was her default move. Staged a meltdown before reality could catch up. Standing on the sidewalk in sunglasses too big for her face, she ranted about a toxic work culture and getting blindsided by internal politics. Her followers flooded the comments with hearts and "you deserve better" messages. They didn't know she'd been cashing checks for 2 years without closing a single contract. While Amanda was on social media, Mom and Dad were working the phones. They called vendors we hadn't used in months, old clients, even some of my friends in the industry. Mom cried to one of our board advisors saying I was in crisis. Dad left a voicemail for a key investor saying he feared I was mentally checked out. When that didn't work, they tried something bolder. Dad called a private meeting with a competitor and offered to bring over a few loyal staff members. If they gave him a leadership role, except no one was loyal to them. No one respected them. They weren't leaders. They were placeholders I'd propped up to avoid hiring strangers. And now that I had no reason to keep the act going, I started filling their spots with people who actually wanted to be there. The first thing I did was call Mark, my cousin, the same guy Dad used to mock every Thanksgiving for doing logos for pizza shops. What Dad didn't know was that Mark had been quietly building a 6-figure portfolio, turning down clients left and right. I offered him Amanda's old title, minus the fluff. Creative lead, no drama, full control over branding. He accepted within minutes. Then I called Aunt Rachel. Mom always said she was too loud, too opinionated, too much like a teacher, which made sense since she was a teacher. 10 years in curriculum development, sharp as hell, and more organized than anyone I'd worked with. I brought her in to manage our internal operations. Within days, she cleaned up workflows my mom had been supervising for years. The irony? My parents hated these two. Always talked down to them at family dinners. Always made sure they sat at the far end of the table. Now they were the ones rebuilding my company. The one my parents tried to hijack. And while things were coming together for us, things were quietly falling apart for them. Amanda's influencer image started to crack. A few clients who had seen her LinkedIn post started replying publicly, pointing out inconsistencies in her resume. One called her out for claiming she led campaigns they knew she wasn't part of. Another hinted she tried to double bill them on an invoice she forgot to mention. Dad tried launching something on his own, registered a generic LLC, built a free website, and started cold emailing contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. One forwarded me the email. It was a disaster full of vague buzzwords, recycled slogans, and a ridiculous promise to reimagine brand alignment. He didn't even notice he spelled the company name wrong in the subject line. Mom stopped posting altogether, but I heard from a cousin that she was telling anyone who'd listened that I was ungrateful and emotionally unstable. She played the martyr in front of anyone over the age of 60 and blamed tech culture for turning me into someone she didn't recognize. The best part, they weren't just out of the company, they were out of the loop. No inside info, no whispers from employees, no power, and no money coming in. Because what none of them realized until it was too late was this. I wasn't just the one funding their lifestyle. I was the only reason they were still relevant. It happened faster than I expected. Not because I underestimated how dependent they were, but because I finally saw how little they built for themselves. 3 weeks after I cut them off, the cracks started showing publicly. Amanda took down her influencer bios. The ones that said VP of Brand, Entrepreneur, Public Speaker. I noticed because someone on our social team flagged it, said a recruiter had asked why she was no longer listed on our website. She told them she was in transition and pivoting into her next venture. But behind the scenes, she was calling mutual contacts asking if anyone knew of consulting work. A week after that, she showed up at Mark's office. Unannounced. He texted me right after. She stood in the lobby for 15 minutes claiming she had unfinished materials to retrieve. When the receptionist told her there were no longer any company materials in her name, she switched tactics. Asked if Mark was around then if he had time for lunch. He didn't, obviously. But what caught my attention was something else. She'd left a manila envelope at the desk. No note, no label, just my name written in black marker. I had it couriered over. Inside were printed screenshots, messages, mostly Slack logs between Amanda and 2 employees, all dated 6 months ago, conversations about pushing back against Brian's hold on creative, about forming a side team with real vision, and one disturbing exchange where Amanda floated the idea of convincing Brian to take a sabbatical so we can rebuild without him interfering. That wasn't what intrigued me, though. What caught my attention was the timing. All those messages happened during a campaign we nearly lost. A campaign that went sideways because Amanda claimed she didn't have the right data. Data I later found had been delayed on purpose. I realized then she hadn't just been lazy. She'd been undermining things subtly for longer than I thought. That envelope was her attempt to spin it to get ahead of the story. Maybe she thought if I found out from her, I'd go easier. She was wrong. Meanwhile, my parents were unraveling in their own way. Dad tried to host a private investment dinner at the country club. I only found out because the manager, who also happened to be a friend of mine, called and asked if I knew anything about it. Said Dad had sent out printed invites with the company logo still on them. Claimed he was co-founder emeritus and wanted to introduce new opportunities in the pipeline. The dinner never happened. No one showed up, not even the people he considered close friends. One of them even forwarded the invite to me with a 2-word message. This guy. As for Mom, she started turning up at extended family gatherings, one she used to skip. My cousin Rachel said she spent the entire evening talking about how I blindsided them, how I was manipulated by outsiders, and how I let jealousy poison the business. Jealousy. That was the word she used. As if I was the one looking in from the outside. Now the irony burned. I kept my distance. Watched as their world slowly crumbled from the inside. The calls became less frequent. The guilt messages turned bitter. Dad sent a 3-paragraph email filled with veiled threats about reputation and family legacy. I didn't reply. They thought that by dragging my name through mud, someone, anyone, would pull them out of the hole they dug. But what they didn't know was that I was about to bury them in it. Not out of spite, out of necessity. It all came to a head when Amanda showed up at my condo building. She'd never been there before. She didn't even know the address until now, which meant someone must have given it to her. Probably one of the few employees still trying to stay neutral. The doorman called me, said she was in the lobby, said she looked like she hadn't slept. I told him not to let her up. He paused. She says it's urgent, he said. I told him again. She doesn't live here. She's not coming up. 30 minutes later, I got an email from her. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. The subject line read, "Let's talk numbers." She was offering to walk away from everything. No lawsuits, no PR mess, no media interviews in exchange for a single payout. A soft landing, she called it. I didn't respond. She sent another the next day. This one was shorter. "Please, for Dad and Mom's sake." I forwarded it to legal. The rail hit came 2 days later when my parents emailed me separately. Same hour, same tone, clearly coordinated. Mom's was a guilt trip. Said she'd never wanted things to come to this. That she was struggling to hold on to her home. Dad's was colder. He sent a direct Venmo request for $14,200 labeled bridge loan urgent. I declined it immediately. They thought they were being clever, trying different angles. But what they didn't realize was that the damage had already been done. They'd gone too far, and now they were trying to crawl back without owning a single thing. They wanted help without accountability. They wanted peace without apology. I watched them spiral from a distance. Amanda deleted half her socials. One of her influencer deals fell through. Apparently, she name-dropped the company in the pitch deck, and when they did a background check, they pulled out. My dad's pathetic LLC never got off the ground. He quietly took down the website. My mom, she sent out resumes to a few nonprofits, but when one of them reached out for a reference, they called me. I told the truth. I didn't embellish. I didn't smear. I simply answered their questions. No, she was not part of any decision-making processes. No, she did not contribute meaningfully to the company's strategy. No, she did not complete any measurable projects during her tenure. They didn't call back. The relatives they used to look down on, Mark, Rachel, even my Uncle Sam, who now handles logistics for our supply chain, they were thriving. Every family barbecue now had a strange tension. Like the room shifted when my name came up. My parents used to be the loudest voices in the room. Now they barely spoke unless someone asked a direct question. They'd lost more than money. They'd lost control of the story. And for once, I didn't feel guilty because the truth was I had been good to them. Too good. I gave them more than they earned, more than they respected, more than they could handle. And they mocked me for it, tried to replace me, tried to rewrite everything I'd built into something they could own. They were never grateful. So now I let them live with what they built on their own, which is to say nothing. It's been 2 months since I cut them off for good. I'd like to say things went quiet after that. That life got simple again. But quiet doesn't always mean over. And sometimes when people lose access to your money, your name, your platform, they get creative. It started with a strange email. The sender was a mid-sized law firm from Chicago. I almost didn't open it. Figured it was spam. But the subject line caught my eye. Formal notice regarding proprietary materials, Gallagher and Company. The company name was mine, but the inquiry wasn't. I opened the attached document and scanned the letter twice. It was from a lawyer representing a competitor of ours. They weren't filing a lawsuit. They were alerting me off the record that 2 individuals had come to them with internal data from my company, Amanda and my dad. They had tried to sell off company files, client lists, pitch templates, campaign blueprints, back-end structure docs, things only a handful of people had access to, things they were never supposed to keep copies of, things they clearly saved before I locked them out. And here's the kicker. The competitor didn't bite. They smelled something off, did their homework, and realized the files weren't theirs to offer. They even attached a short internal memo stating that ethical concerns prevent further engagement. The attorney who emailed me said they didn't want legal trouble, just wanted me to be aware in case anything came back around. So now, not only had they humiliated themselves trying to pose as founders of a company they never built, they tried to hand off my work like a bag of stolen tools. For what? A job offer? A quick check. One last desperate grasp at relevance. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it for a few days. Mark was furious when I told him. Rachel said we needed to press charges. Even our newest hire, someone who never met my family, said I had every right to pursue it legally. And they're probably right. But something about it just left me tired. Not surprised. Not even angry. Just tired because this was never about money. Not really. It was about control. And now that they didn't have any, they'd rather burn the bridge than admit they never built it. None of them have reached out since. not even to defend themselves. Not a call, not a message, not a whisper from anyone connected to them, which tells me everything I need to know. They've either moved on in shame or they're waiting for some way to flip the story again. Maybe I'll take legal action. Maybe I'll just keep the files, document everything, and wait. But one thing's for sure, I won't be caught off guard again. The business is stronger than it's ever been. The team is tighter, and for once the silence around me doesn't feel like tension. Feels like freedom. I don't know if this story has more to it. Maybe something else will come up. Maybe it's over. Maybe they'll try again in some other way. I honestly don't care anymore. But I'm grateful to everyone who paid attention. Really, thanks for listening.